Welcome back to the deep dive. You know, sometimes we find a source, and it's not just informative. It's like a crystal ball,
Hmm.
into the future. And I think today's source, mandate for leadership, the conservative promise, is a lot like that.
Yeah, it really lays out like a roadmap for conservatives, for the next presidential administration.
Yeah,
It's like a blueprint for how they want to govern starting in 2025.
exactly. And it gets really specific, too. I mean, they dive deep into all kinds of things,
Oh, yeah.
like education, national defense,
Yeah.
and even like how they'd actually like reshape the government.
Yeah, and what's really interesting is this isn't just like a bullet point list or something. It's
Oh,
like they're trying to present a whole vision for the country,
yeah.
based on conservative principles.
Okay, so let's get into it.
Yeah.
The document starts by talking about families and how important they are to society.
Hmm.
But they don't stop there. They actually say they want to use federal power, like tax policy,
Yeah.
to deal with what they're calling a family crisis.
Right. And that's where things get interesting because they suggest things like getting rid of marriage penalties in the tax code and welfare programs.
Wow.
Basically using money to encourage people to form certain types of families.
That's a bold approach for sure.
Yeah.
It really makes you think about how much the government should be involved in family life.
Hmm.
I mean, that's a debate that's been going on forever.
Yeah.
How effective can the government really be when it comes to strengthening families?
It's complicated, and the answer probably depends on a lot of different things.
Right.
But this document clearly says that the government can and should play a big part.
Okay, so moving on, the document then goes after the federal bureaucracy,
Hmm.
saying it's gotten too big, too powerful,
Right.
and that it doesn't care about the needs of everyday Americans.
And they have some pretty dramatic solutions. They
Yeah.
want to overhaul the civil service, and they even want to bring back IQ tests for federal hiring.
We bring back IQ tests?
Yeah.
But those were discontinued like decades ago because people were worried about racial bias.
That's right. And this is a good example of something we see a lot in this document.
Okay.
They want to make government better and more accountable, but they also have to think about what that might mean for things like diversity and equity in the civil service.
Okay, let's switch gears to national defense.
Okay.
The document says that China is the biggest priority for U.S. defense planning.
Hmm.
And they're calling for a pretty aggressive approach. I mean, they want to modernize and expand the nuclear arsenal,
Yeah.
make the defense industry stronger, and spend more on the military.
They even want to prioritize American and allied manufacturing when it comes to defense contracts.
Oh, wow.
So they want to rely less on foreign suppliers, especially from countries like China.
Okay, so they're thinking about more than just military strength. They're
Mhm.
thinking about economic competition and strategy, too.
Exactly.
Now, things get really serious when we get to Homeland Security. They suggest some big changes to the Department of Homeland Security. They even hint at maybe shrinking it or getting rid of it completely.
Yeah, and that goes back to their idea of streamlining the government
Right.
and
Yes.
making it smaller. They think that a more focused approach to Homeland Security might actually be better.
Okay. But they also want some specific policy changes.
Yep.
And those are sure to be controversial.
Oh, definitely. Like, they want stricter immigration enforcement. They want to use all the detention space available, and they want to limit the use of parole for people crossing the border.
Wow.
They even say that the Secretary of Homeland Security should be able to ignore certain legal requirements during a mass migration event.
Whoa. That's a pretty big idea.
It is.
I can see how that might make things easier in a crisis. But it also makes you worry about due process and people's rights.
You're right. And that's something that comes up a lot in this document.
Okay.
It's this tension between wanting to be efficient and secure and wanting to protect individual liberties and legal processes.
Okay, so we've talked about families, the bureaucracy, defense, and Homeland Security.
Mm-hmm.
What about the economy? What kind of vision do they have for that?
Unsurprisingly, they want to go back to classic conservative economic ideas.
Right.
Free trade, less regulation, and responsible spending. But there are some interesting things that go beyond the usual talking points.
Like what? Give me the good stuff.
Well, they want to get rid of the Export-Import Bank,
Okay.
which helps American businesses compete globally.
Oh.
They say it's corporate welfare and that it messes up the market.
No, that's a proposal that will definitely get people talking.
Oh, yeah.
I bet the people who support the bank would say that it's really important for American jobs and businesses.
Yeah, especially in certain industries.
Yeah.
And that's what makes this document so interesting. It's
Mm.
not just repeating the same old things. They're putting forward some specific and sometimes surprising ideas that challenge the usual way of thinking. thinking.
Okay, so we've covered a lot already, but we're just getting started.
Yeah.
Next, we'll look at their ideas for education social issues and how they see the role of technology and innovation in the future of the country.
It's definitely a vision that's going to get people talking on all sides.
For sure.
So get ready. It's going to be interesting.
All right, buckle up, everyone.
So picking up where we left off, this document really gets into education.
Okay.
They're big on school choice.
Yep.
They think that federal education funding should follow the child, not the school system.
So, like letting parents choose the best schools for their kids,
Exactly.
even if it means going outside the public school system.
Right. They even specifically talk about the DC Opportunity Scholarship Program, which gives vouchers to low-income families so their kids can go to private schools.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I can see why people who don't like the public schools would like that.
Yeah.
But what about the public schools themselves? I mean, would this hurt them?
Right.
And can these programs really make sure that all kids have access to good schools?
Those are definitely some of the big questions about school choice.
Yeah.
And the document tries to address them.
Okay.
They say that competition would actually make all schools better, public and private.
Interesting. Okay, so we've talked about education. Let's move on to something that always gets people riled up, social issues.
All right.
How does this document handle those?
Well, they definitely don't hold back when it comes to expressing conservative views.
Yep.
They talk about abortion, transgenderism, and the role of religion in society. They want to protect conscience rights, promote traditional marriage, and limit federal funding for abortion providers.
Sounds like they're really getting into the culture wars here.
Yeah, they're definitely sticking to those traditional conservative values.
Okay.
This part of the document really shows how important those moral beliefs are to conservative thinking.
Right.
It's all about the sanctity of life, the importance of the traditional family, and the role of faith.
Yeah, I can see how this part of the document will get strong reactions. These are some of the most divisive issues in America right now.
Absolutely. And the people who wrote this know that they're not avoiding the debate. They're running right into it.
Okay, let's change gears again and talk about technology.
Right.
This is something that's always changing, and it affects everything, from the economy to national security.
It does.
So how does this document deal with technology and innovation?
Well, they say that technological advancement is important for both the economy and national security.
Okay.
They want more investment in research and development. They want to simplify regulations on new technologies.
Right.
And they want to protect intellectual property.
So basically, they want to make sure America stays ahead of the game
Right.
when it comes to things like artificial intelligence, biotechnology, and all that.
Exactly. But they're also worried about American businesses helping China develop its own AI.
Oh, wow.
They want a plan to stop that from happening.
Interesting.
They want to be more aggressive about protecting American intellectual property and making sure it doesn't end up in the wrong hands.
That makes sense. It's a tough balance, though, right?
Yeah.
You want to encourage innovation, but you also have to think about national security.
Exactly. And this document suggests that they're leaning more towards security.
Okay, so we talked about their vision for families, the bureaucracy, national defense, social issues, and technology. But this document goes even deeper than that.
It does.
It actually gets into specific departments and agencies,
Yeah.
proposing reforms and even suggesting getting rid of some altogether.
Right. And that's where things get really interesting. It's one thing to talk about ideas,
Right.
but it's another to actually figure out how to put them into practice.
Yes.
And this document tries to do just that.
Okay, so let's dive in. Where do they start?
One of their big targets is the Department of Homeland Security.
Okay.
They think that it's too big and bureaucratic, and that might be making it less effective. They even suggest breaking it up into smaller, more focused agencies.
Wow, that would be a huge change.
It would.
And it really shows how much they want to streamline the government and make it smaller.
Exactly. And they have the same idea for other agencies, too.
Okay.
Like the civil service, they want to make it easier to hire, promote, and even fire people. They say that the current system protects workers who aren't doing a good job.
So they want the federal government to be more like a business.
Yeah.
With more focus on efficiency and accountability.
That's a good way to put it.
Okay.
And they're not afraid of controversial topics.
Like what?
Like they say that the Secretary of Homeland Security should be able to waive certain legal requirements during a mass migration event.
That sounds like it could be abused.
Yeah.
I mean, who decides what a mass migration is?
Right.
And how do we make sure that this power isn't used unfairly?
Those are good questions. And The document admits that this idea would have to be carefully thought out
Oh.
to make sure it doesn't violate people's rights.
Mm-hmm.
But they say that you need some flexibility to deal with a crisis.
Right. It's that classic dilemma.
Yeah.
Security versus liberty.
Exactly.
Okay, so they're ready to shake things up at Homeland Security. What about other agencies? Who else are they targeting?
Well, they go after some familiar ones like the EPA and the Department of Education, but they also go after some that you might not expect, like the Federal Reserve.
The Federal Reserve? What's wrong with the Fed?
They say it has too much power
Okay.
and that its policies have caused inflation, economic instability.
Wow.
They want to limit the Fed's independence and maybe even go back to some kind of gold standard.
Wow, going back to the gold standard. That's a pretty radical idea.
It is.
Nobody's talked about that seriously in a long time.
Yeah.
Sounds like they really want to change things up.
They do, and it's not just about the economy. They also want to change social programs like welfare and food stamps. They think those programs are too generous and discourage people from working. They want to make it so you have to work to get those benefits, and they want to reduce the number of people who depend on them.
So basically, they want to make the government smaller in every way.
That's right.
That's a pretty ambitious plan.
It is.
And I bet the people who benefit from the current system won't be happy about it.
Oh, yeah, they'll definitely push back.
Right.
But that's what makes this document so interesting. It's a bold vision for how a conservative government would run things.
Yeah.
And it shows the fight over ideas is far from over.
Okay, so we're back and ready to wrap up our look at mandate for leadership. We've gone over a lot, from those big ideas about the role of government
Yeah.
to those really specific policy proposals, like for education and national security.
Right. And now we can really zoom in on how those conservative ideas could actually affect how the different departments and agencies work on a day-to-day basis.
Exactly. So let's start with the Department of Energy.
Okay.
The document says they want to change how the department works, focusing more on energy independence and getting rid of what they see as too many regulations.
They specifically say they want to get rid of the Office of Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy.
Wow.
They think it's messing up the market by choosing winners and losers.
So basically, they want the government to be less involved
Right.
and let the market decide what happens in the energy sector.
Exactly. They think that businesses are better at developing new energy technologies
Okay.
and that the government just gets in the way and makes things more expensive.
Interesting. I can see how people who believe in free markets would like that.
Yeah.
But what about climate change and switching to cleaner energy?
Well, the document does say that protecting the environment is important,
Okay.
but they think it should be done in a way that doesn't hurt the economy or take away people's freedoms.
Right.
They want to make regulations simpler
Mhm.
and focus on solutions that work with the market.
Okay, so let's move on to another agency that's always in the news, the EPA.
Right.
They want to make some big changes there, too.
Yeah, they think the EPA has become too bureaucratic and powerful.
Mhm.
They want to combine offices, streamline processes, and just make the agency smaller overall.
Okay.
They also want to look at the EPA's scientific research and advisory committees. They think those groups have been influenced by politics.
So basically, they want to make sure the EPA is focused on science and the economy
Right.
and not on ideology.
Exactly. They think the EPA has put too many burdens on businesses
Okay.
and hurt economic growth, all in the name of protecting the environment. They want to find a better balance.
Okay, now let's talk about an agency that affects a lot of people every day.
Okay.
The Department of Housing and Urban Development, or HUD.
Yeah.
What do they want to do with HUD?
They want to make some major changes there, too. They
Wow.
want to restructure the department combine programs, make it smaller, and focus on providing affordable housing to people who really need it.
So they're basically trying to make HUD more efficient.
That's part of it.
Okay.
But they also want to make sure that HUD's policies match up with their conservative beliefs.
Interesting. Like what?
Well, for example, they want to get rid of the Biden administration's PAVE policies,
Okay.
which were about making property appraisals more fair. They think those policies actually undermine how appraisals are done.
So it's not just about efficiency.
Right.
They also want to make sure that HUD's policies reflect their ideology.
Exactly. And that's something we see throughout this whole document. They're not just trying to make a government work better.
Right.
They want to make it reflect their values, too.
Okay, let's move on to another big one. The Department of the Interior.
Right.
They manage a lot of land and resources. What are they going to do with that?
They want to change how the department manages those lands.
Okay.
And put more emphasis on energy development and
Yeah.
using resources instead of conservation and protecting the environment.
That sounds like a pretty big change.
It is.
Right now, the focus is on protecting those lands and using them for recreation.
Right. They think those lands should be used to help the American people through economic development,
Okay.
not just kept for special interest groups.
Mm-hmm.
They specifically want to open up more of that land for oil and gas drilling, mining, and logging.
I bet that will make a lot of people mad.
Oh, yeah. Especially environmental groups and people who like to use those lands for recreation.
Right. What about other parts of the Interior Department, like
Yeah.
the Fish and Wildlife Service?
They want to change the Endangered Species Act.
Okay.
They think it's been used to stop economic development and that the decisions about which species to protect are often based on bad science.
Okay.
They want to make it easier to take species off the endangered list
Right.
and to consider the economic impact more when deciding whether to protect a species.
That's a controversial idea for sure. It could really affect how we protect endangered species.
And it shows a bigger theme in this document.
What's that?
They don't trust environmental regulations very much,
Mm-hmm.
and they think economic growth is more important.
Okay, let's move on to an agency that's been in the news a lot, the FBI.
Yeah.
They have some pretty big changes planned for the FBI, too.
They think the FBI has become too political and powerful.
Okay.
They want to restructure it to focus more on law enforcement,
Mhm.
maybe even create a separate agency for intelligence and counterterrorism.
Wow.
They also want to stop the FBI from doing anything related to fighting misinformation.
Interesting. So they want to limit what the FBI can do.
Exactly. They think the FBI has gone beyond its original purpose
Okay.
and is getting involved in things it shouldn't.
Mhm.
They want to make sure it focuses on fighting crime and terrorism and not on targeting political opponents or stopping free speech.
A lot of conservatives would agree with that.
Yeah, especially after what's happened with the FBI in recent years.
Right? But other people might think the FBI is important for protecting national security and our rights.
Definitely, and that's what makes this document so interesting. It
Mhm.
shows exactly how a conservative government would run things.
Right.
But it also makes us think about the role of government, the balance of power,
Right.
and how to protect individual rights.
Okay. So we've covered a lot of ground today looking at the conservative vision for all these different parts of the government.
Yeah, we really have.
But this document goes even deeper than that.
It does.
What are some final thoughts you want to leave our listeners with?
Well, it's important to remember that this is just one way of looking at things. It's the conservative way.
Right.
There are other ways of thinking about how to govern.
Right.
It's up to each of us to think about these ideas,
Right.
to decide what we believe,
Mhm.
and to come to our own conclusions.
This deep dive has definitely given us a lot to think about.
It has?
And we hope it's made you want to learn more about these issues and to get involved in the conversation of the future of our country.
We want you to look at different viewpoints.
Right.
Think about the evidence
Mm-hmm.
and make your own informed decisions.
Because in the end,
Yeah,
the future of our country is up to all of us.
that's right.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.